This video's not made for kids, you crazy bitch-ass bastard!
Welcome back, my humble iron horses. Now, in the last timeline video, we ended it off with Flying Scotsman beginning his North American tour. Now, this volume, we will cover the 70s and 80s. So sit back, relax, and with that, please enjoy. In 1970, as Sir Handel and Peter Sam prolong their talk of Duke, Wilbur Awdry catches interest of this and goes on a search party with his friends Teddy Boston, Fergus Duncan, and Sir Robert Richard Normanby to the abandoned Mid-Sodor Railway. Their search ends when Teddy Boston broke through the ground and landed into the interior of Duke's old shed where he was sleeping. They brought Duke to the works to be restored and reunited with Sir Handel and Peter Sam, and became the number 8 of the Skarloey Railway. This would be the year Duke the Lost Engine would be written. Now originally, they intended to purchase a diesel locomotive to be their number 8, Marty, from the Parkgate Steelworks in Rotherham, but the offer was declined. In 1972, Percy plays a ghostly trick on Thomas for not believing in his story after getting into an accident with Lime. Percy would also get called a green caterpillar with red stripes and would have Thomas's insult become a reality when Percy gets hay stuck to him from a spilt crate of treacle from the South Knapford Harbor. The Farquhar Quarry bought a new Class 04 shunter diesel named Mavis. Toby tries to take her under his wing and show her how to shunt, but Mavis wanted to shunt trucks her way. One time she got in trouble by being stranded at the tram road, but made up for the trouble after saving Toby from a little tightrope incident. And as a reward, Mavis will be allowed to travel outside the quarry every once in a while when she can. This would be the year tramway engines would be written. This would also be the final book Wilbur Awdry would write before his resigning, as well as his final time visiting the island of Sodor. The engine Awdry would also retire from being his private engine and join the other engines at the Vickerstown Railway Museum during his retirement. Grim news about the Flying Scotsman would state that he would be stranded in California during his North American tour. But in the following year of 1973, William Bill McAlpine would purchase the Flying Scotsman and bring him back to England. In 1974, after 51 years of service, Elmer would retire and be brought to the Vickerstown Railway Museum along with Ward, Manford, Stewart, and Awdry. A Class 87 electric diesel would take over for her assignments. In 1975, following withdrawal, it was presumed that Bloomer has been scrapped, until being discovered by Sir Charles Topham Hatt in an old shed during his trip in Wigstownshire. He was bought and running on the Farquhar branch line with his 2 saloon coaches. Bloomer was a rare sight to see in public, for the last sighting of him was when he attended the Shildon Cavalcade, celebrating 150 years of the Stockton and Darlington Railway following restoration. After the celebration, Bloomer was hauling special trains for occasions every once in a while. In 1977, a road bridge called the Jubilee Bridge was built over the Mainline Channel, and a motor rail terminal was built at Kildane. With Rennius Quarry being sloped, a couple battery power engines were purchased to work at the quarry. One from the Wingrove and Rogers Ltd., and another from the Bev Company. In 1978, a BR Class 309 was ordered to run passenger services on the Peel-Godred line alongside the Class 87, who got promoted to mixed traffic duties. In 1979, the aluminum works would rely on road vehicles to transport aluminum from excavation sites rather than rails. So Freddie was out of service and sheeted, leaving his fate unknown. In 1980, the Mainline Loop started construction to run from Kildane to the Whispering Woods. On the Skarloey Railway, Mr. Peter Sam retires from being controller of the railway and passes his work to his son, Mr. Roger Sam. In 1983, on Thomas's branch line, the station master's car was stolen by a pair of thieves, only for them to be apprehended by the constables thanks to Thomas, who was running alongside them. A postman named Tom Tipper was using a bike to go around the island to deliver mail when his van was out of commission. One day, Percy accidentally ran over the bike after a naughty boy tries to ride on it along the station platform. One evening on the main line, additional vans were added to Henry's flying kipper, so Duck was called to bank Henry up Gordon's Hill when a tail lamp fell off the van and Duck collided into the van. Lastly, Gordon was starting to feel his age when express work was getting tiring for him. Henry handled the express until he fell under the weather, so Percy, Duck, and Thomas once triple-headed the express, only to barely reach Crovan's Gate by a few yards, but it still impressed Gordon. During this year, Christopher Awdry, the son of Wilbur Awdry, was on Sodor hearing about these events and wrote his book, Really Useful Engines, which got the railway series up and running again for the first time in 11 years, and Christopher became a part-time Sodrian historian, just like his father. Farmers were starting to install fences so their stock won't roam freely near tracks. So now, engines without cowcatchers or side plates can enter the Farquhar Quarry. A withdrawn diesel, 4125, was on trial and being shown around by Boko. 4125 took a dislike to steam engines and was planning to return home the following day after he refuels and cleans himself in the sheds. Unfortunately, he accidentally slid into the sheds and broke a massive hole through the wall. After the rescue, 4125 was sent back in disgrace and later scrapped. In 1984, James was ranting about his curiosity on why some diesels needed two cabs until one foggy day he had gotten into an accident with a well wagon at a junction at Knapford. Henry would later on be proud of his green livery and insult James's livery, saying that he won't want to be red like a fire engine. But the next day, he would damage his tender coupling and cause a fire by accidentally setting the sleepers ablaze. During the winter, James would take on too much water, overflowing the brim of his filler cab, and ended up frozen from the weather, causing his injector to fail. A new resident on Sodor, which is a Class 47 diesel, comes to the rescue. At first, James felt humiliated, but he quickly befriends the diesel, realizing that not all diesels are horrid. This would be the year James and the Diesel Engines would be written. This would also be the final year Sir Charles Topham Hatt is controller of the Northwestern Railway, as he would retire and pass his role to his son, Stephen Topham Hatt. Now Stephen Topham Hatt is the new controller of the Northwestern Railway. On the 9th of October, TV producer Britt Alcroft would adapt the Railway series on TV, titled Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. The series was a success. In 1985, on the Skarloey Railway, Sir Handel is excited to visit the Talcott Railway, but can't go until Duke is restored. He eventually understands that patience is a virtue after a minor accident when almost leaving the guard behind. Peter Sam will get into a prickly problem with trimmed branches from workmen. When Boy Scouts were in need of some soda, it was up to Duncan to bring them some. But the problem was the refreshment lady was out of soda, but had other beverages for the Scouts. They were most pleased and thanked Duncan. During his trip on the Talcott Railway, Sir Handel got his eye poked from a tree branch. Now he had to wear an eye patch for a while. Even though he enjoyed his trip, Sir Handel was delighted to return home. This would be the year Great Little Engines would be written. During Sir Handel's time on the Talcott Railway, a funicular railway was built at the terminus of the Skarloey Railway. The mainline loop would be finished and open for service. For any diesels visiting or working on Sodor, a diesel works was planned to be built in case any diesel engines were in need for maintenance. In 1986, Thomas would go through some trouble this year, like having a banter with Percy about liveries and coal, becoming a runaway but saved by Harold. The mainline's viaduct would be under repair, delaying the big engine's guarantee connection with him, and calling Percy a drip until he gets a drip in his boiler as comeuppance. But all's well that ends well when Percy comes to help, and they bonded back their friendship once again. This would be the year More About Thomas the Tank Engine would be written. The Coldefeld Railway would receive their first diesel to run with them as the number 9, Nathan. During Christmas time, Thomas was chosen to fetch the Christmas tree for the party at Tidmouth Station, only to end up stuck in a snowdrift once again. The Scottish twins set off to the rescue and brought him back along with the Christmas tree in time for the party, and Harold arrived with a special guest, Father Christmas, or more commonly known as Santa Claus. Befana retired from the boat train services and becomes a static display along with the other engines at the Vickerstown Railway Museum. In 1987, Gordon's age is once again catching up to him, and the Scottish twins brought up thoughts about a high-speed train. Yet Gordon remains determined to prove his worth. After a couple incidents of wheel slippage, coating wedding guests with soot, and Stephen Topham Hatt's hat with ash, he managed to surpass up his hill with a gap in his firebox and help with the rail tour train in Barrow-in-Furness. During Gordon's absence, a Class 43 high-speed train set, Pip and Emma, were borrowed to handle Sodor's Express. James got a chance to meet and help the two diesels when they broke down, and even the other engines greeted them too. When Gordon returned, he received forgiveness from the controller and brought the passengers home on the mainland, while Douglas was bringing Pip and Emma back too. This would be the year Gordon and the high-speed trains would be written. The ballast chute was refurbished with enclosed walls around the standard gauge section to prevent smoke clouds and ballast dust from spreading. One day, Percy would fall ill, and surprisingly, Diesel was brought to the Farquhar branch line as a loan to fill in for Percy until he gets better. It wasn't a good start in the yard, but after Thomas gets into trouble at Dryaw Hill, Diesel reluctantly helped Thomas for the passenger's sake, and the coaches praise him for his heroic work. And Diesel returned to the mainland after Percy's return. While it's not documented, it's said that Sir Stephen Topham Hatt took a trip to Barry's Island to preserve an LMS Ivic Class 2262T engine named Barry to bring him to his island to run push-pull services. He also did something heroic as well. This happened somewhere before 1988. In 1988, a storm would make a mess at the South Knapford Harbor, so Trevor was called to help Thomas clear it up. After the mess was cleared, Trevor then gave children rides along the shore. The Elsbridge Viaduct was in need of repairs, and a weight limit was added until the repairs were complete. Thomas, out of all the engines that work on the Farquhar branch line, was too heavy to cross it, so he was sent to the Brenham branch to work with Edward and the China Clay twins. Meanwhile, on the Farquhar branch line, Mavis runs into a lorry, Toby briefly reminisces about his days at the harbor, Percy caused an accident with some trucks and damaged a grumpy barge named Bulstrode, relocating him to Tidmouth, and finally, Toby would derail at a crossing near the quarry from ice on the rails. This would be the year Toby, Trucks, and Trouble would be written. The vicar was having a fete, and Trevor was invited after his repairs. He even saved Bertie from a soft mud pit. On the Brenham branch line, Thomas would run into a lorry loaded with eggs. Bill and Ben would meet and greet enthusiasts and help a ship get out to sea. Trevor would stop Edward when part of his train got derailed, and Thomas would save Ben from a flooded track area known as the Drain. All of those events would be written in the next year's book, Thomas and the Twins. Meanwhile, on the main line, Percy was called to take James's goods train of fruit after his brakes were jammed, only for him to end up in a jam when his train crashed. In 1989, Thomas and the Twins was written. With British Rail beginning to sector its regions, the Northwestern Railway was categorized as Sodor Northwest. Thomas would return to the Farquhar branch line only to deal with buckled tracks, leaving him out of commission once again and letting Bertie take care of his passengers until the tracks were mended. In exchange, Bertie's roads would have potholes needing to be filled with tar. So after an accident at a toad's pond on his branch line, Thomas told Edward about the roads, and Edward gladly helped out, making Bertie most thankful. The Skarloey Railway would have a new resident being their number 9, a Hunsled 040 diesel named Fred from the National Coal Board. Furthermore, the TV series would be aired in other countries, like the USA. It would be a little spin-off known as Shining Time Station, and have a United States dub of the Thomas episodes as a way of introducing US citizens to the land of Thomas. At the North Knapford Harbor, Stephen Topham Hatt would give a familiar diesel shunter a second chance to help Percy and Duck, only to cause more trouble and take it too far when he pushed trucks of China clay into the sea. Once again, Diesel got the boot, in a bad way. Bill and Ben would start bickering at Wellsworth shunting yards, but eventually stop and be brothers again after working together pulling Boco's goods train. But then, thanks to the troublesome trucks, the twins would end up having the docks in an unorganized mess. But the following day, after saving workmen from a landslide at their clay pits, the twins would be praised as heroes. This is where we would conclude our 5th volume of the Timeline series. Join us next month for when we covered the 1990s and the 2000s.